Welcome to the Illuminator Getting Started series. This one is on the Illuminator installation. So a summary of the installation steps is as follows. First, you'll have to have the install Docker Engine v2 and run the Docker system. Make sure that you have v2 installed. Download the Illuminator installer script, run the Illuminator installer, and we'll examine the Docker Compose file to fully understand what customizations that you can are possible. To install Docker, navigate to that URL and install that v2 version of Docker on your host central site computer. The version of Docker must support the Docker Compose command line option. So start Docker. So each flavor of Linux might be slightly different in the way you start Docker, so you should consult that documentation. In summary, if you want to start Docker, use the command sudo system controller start Docker, and you'll want to probably place this script in a systemd on Ubuntu, for example, so it starts up at boot up. So to verify everything's running, you go to the command line and run docker -- version, and you should see some kind of output that looks similar to what's there, Docker version, and you might have something a little bit newer than what's listed here. Then you download the Illuminator installer script from Kalian. It's about 230 megabytes in size. The file name format looks something like Illuminator release underscore with some version. So for example, 1_0_0. Place this file on a host computer where Docker is installed and create a new directory. So in my case, I use Illuminator release _1_0_0 and make sure there's no other files in this directory. And ensure you have read-write permissions to allow it to be executed. So you might want to run chmod 777 on that file, and just to make sure you can execute it. To run the installer, you just execute / on that file, and then the script will perform the following. It's going to check to make sure you've got Docker is installed, and if not, the script will exit. It'll unpack the contents to the local directory, and we'll see the next slide for the contents. Install Illuminator and the InfluxDB Docker images, and it'll prompt you for elevated sudo access if need be. And it'll list the Illuminator and InfluxDB Docker images installed in Docker after installation, so you can see that the installation worked. And it'll prompt you for a base input directory, which is written into the Docker Compose YAML file for the following subdirectory data. So the measurement subdirectory data includes all your InfluxDB files. Workspace configuration, this is where all your workspace and project file is going to be stored in the Derby DB database. The web server port will be configurable. The DB log directory will also be configurable, and your generated certificates. So it'll prompt you to start the Illuminator at the end of all that, and the InfluxDB containers, and then it'll wait 15 seconds to start it all up. And then after that, it'll prompt you if you want to launch the default browser to the URL for the Illuminator. So these are some of the files that get unpacked in the installation script. The InfluxDB 178.tar is your database, your time series database, where we store all the measurement data. The Illuminator 100tar is the Docker image for the application. There's a README, which is a text file, and it describes to install the Illuminator software and run it. So it's similar to what you're seeing now. And then there's a start and stop Illuminator scripts. So if you want to specifically start and stop the system, you can do that from the command line. As well, there's a subdirectory called D4Sim. This is a subdirectory that's filled with D4 simulator scripts and some Java runtime and a certificate for the simulator, and there's some start and stop simulator scripts and some configuration. So here you've got a start sim London script that corresponds to a London config file for a specific D4 site, and then there's three sites of these, so there's 6 files, and the port number is also in the config file. So this is what you're going to match when you go on to adding a project file for that site. And you can copy and paste these configuration files and edit them and make more sites as need be. So this is what the Docker Compose YAML file looks like. At the top, everything that's to the left of the colon is something that the startup script will in fact override, but by default this is what you will get. So in your host home directory you'll have it'll prompt you for the Illuminator data directory, and you'll see that is in everywhere there's a red circle. The first one is the InfluxDB directory where the database measurement files are going to be stored. The second circle is your host port 5678. The third circle is where the configuration data is stored for your workspaces in the Illuminator DB subdirectory within the Illuminator data. And then there's a /logs directory, so that's all your software logs. So that's used by Kalian. If we see there's some trouble on your system, we can go in there and look around to see what's going on. There's also a subdirectory for generated certificates. And the Docker external port is the next circle at the bottom. That's 5678. And the one that's quite important is the Docker external IP address. This is the IP address of your host computer, and it's used. It's passed into the D4 systems when your carrier monitoring is started, and that way it's a callback IP address. So all of the measurement results that the D4 measures will get called back and sent back to the central Illuminator site. So the Illuminator will have a demo coming next, and we'll see that running. And once you see the demo, you'll see all this in action, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.